Every empire swears that its currency is secure. Every government claims that its declarations will last indefinitely. Yet history, as time passes, always exposes these claims. From Rome to France, from the Confederacy to modern Lebanon, people have often opened their eyes to find their expectations and savings devalued, their earnings rendered worthless, and stolen by governments they believe to be stable. Decline is not rare. It is, in fact, a rule. The crucial question is how to safeguard ourselves when financial systems collapse. The illusion of perpetuity is the riskiest financial flaw. We look at our account balances, our national currencies, and think they are as solid as rock. But money is not stable. It provides security, yet that security can vanish overnight. History is this unforgiving and instructive. Every collapse and bankruptcy shows what truly preserves wealth and what turns to dust. These historical events leave us lessons, experiences, and warnings. Notice, those who survive these disasters are not the most trusted. They are the first to hesitate. Imagine the Byzantine Empire, which stood firm even 1,000 years after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. At the center of the Byzantine economy was the gold solidus, universally accepted by merchants across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia without hesitation. It was so trusted that for centuries it was the closest thing to a global reserve currency in the medieval world. Interestingly, one might think Rome learned from the silver denarius crisis, but the emperors continued to debase it until it was nearly tin-plated. This has been recounted before. Yet centuries later, the Byzantines made the same mistake with gold, reducing its purity and mixing it with lesser metals. Initially unnoticed, trust eventually eroded. Iron coins that had shaped Mediterranean trade became just another political tale. Devaluation shattered credibility, and the Byzantine economy could no longer maintain its former balance. What remained? Paper promises or state laws? Number. Real gold or land quietly accumulated by merchants beyond imperial reach preserved wealth, while everyone else saw their money lose value. The first lesson: governments cannot resist debasing their currency, and when they do, real value flows to assets that cannot be fabricated. But not every collapse comes from government tampering with money. Sometimes everything results from sudden shocks. In the mid-14th century, Europe faced its most devastating pandemic, the Black Death. Between 1347 and 1351, half of Europe's population perished. Cities emptied, villages were destroyed, and trade routes became dysfunctional. Yet the economic story of the plague was more complex than mere destruction. When more than half of the workforce vanished, labor became valuable. Survivors could demand higher wages. Food and land became abundant relative to people. Wealthy families, with silver, gold, goods, or labor capacity, gained bargaining power they had never imagined. Once priceless land could only be partially acquired. Houses were empty, fields uncultivated, and survivors faced a buyer's market. If this sounds familiar, it should. We witnessed a more advanced version during the COVID pandemic. Supply chains disrupted, governments printed trillions in new banknotes, and income inequality widened. Those with liquidity bought up assets while wage earners were left behind. The pattern is clear. Global pandemics redistribute wealth constantly. The survivors of the Black Death climbed the social ladder through scarcity. Those who survived COVID consolidated assets, taking over what others could not maintain. The lesson is harsh but true. Crises reward opportunists and punish the unprepared. As shocks show how quickly economies can be affected, the collapse of banking in Renaissance Florence offers another life lesson. Seemingly massive institutions can fall like dominoes. In the 1340s, Florence was Europe's financial hub, home to powerful banking families and the pulse of economic life. The Bardi and Peruzzi families were so wealthy they lent heavily to kings, most disastrously to England's Edward III. When Edward defaulted, banks collapsed. Depositors' savings vanished overnight. Trade stopped. The stock market crashed. Florence, once wealthy and powerful, was thrown into disaster. What did ordinary people learn? The myth that too big to fail is as old as finance itself. Institutions exist to make profit, not to safeguard your life. When they fail, they take what you gathered. This lesson repeats in every era, from the fall of Florence to the chaos of Lehman Brothers in 2008 to the freezing of bank accounts in Lebanon. Survivors learn that a company's promises are only valid until they are not. The American Civil War is remembered for bloody battles, political upheaval, and the abolition of slavery. Yet behind gunpowder and speeches, there was a merciless financial war many Americans barely understand today. The North and South both had to print money on a massive scale. In the North, the government issued greenbacks, paper money not backed by gold, only by the U.S. government's promise. It seemed initially a bold, patriotic experiment, but the more greenbacks printed, the less they were worth. Inflation eroded value, trust faltered. In the South, the situation was worse. The Confederacy printed staggering amounts of graybacks. By the war's end, inflation had reached nearly unimaginable levels. Prices multiplied thousands of times. Wages could buy almost nothing. Soldiers' pay was worthless before spending. Families carried bags of money, unable to buy even a loaf of bread. By 1865, Confederate money was not just weak, it was dead. The crucial factor in this collapse was not paper promises, but tangible assets: land, food, gold, all retained value. Money became a cruel joke. For ordinary Southerners, it was catastrophic. Lifelong savings turned to dust. For opportunists, war offered the chance to acquire assets cheaply. The seldom heard but essential American lesson: your country has already experienced currency collapse. Protection comes not from the paper in your wallet, but from owning value the system cannot print. France also provides a bitter example of how revolutions can destroy money faster than war. In the 1790s, revolutionaries overthrew the monarchy and seized church lands, issuing a new paper currency, the assignat, theoretically backed by the value of confiscated property. Assignats were meant to stabilize the economy, but the government printed them without limit. Each new issuance diluted the value of the previous notes. Prices soared, wages lagged, and assignats quickly became worthless. Farmers refused to sell food for paper, demanding goods or silver instead. Bread riots returned to Paris, and the revolution consumed itself. Winners in this collapse were not those holding patriotic paper, but those with gold, food, or property, things the government could not print. For ordinary Parisians, the lesson came too late. Promises, however noble, are only as valuable as others' willingness to accept them. When trust breaks, savings do not merely shrink, they vanish swiftly. 2 centuries later, the lesson reappeared in Asia. In 1997, a speculative attack on the Thai baht escalated into a regional crisis. Thailand had borrowed in dollars, assuming its currency would remain stable. When it collapsed, foreign-denominated debt became impossible to repay overnight. Investors fled. Southeast Asian currencies, Indonesia, Malaysia, South Korea, fell like dominoes. Economies shrank, unemployment rose, governments turned to the IMF. The greatest sufferers were not the global hedge funds causing the crisis, but ordinary citizens whose savings lost value, whose mortgages doubled, and whose livelihoods vanished. Again, painfully familiar. Those borrowing in foreign currency or on others' money are the victims. A collapse may seem local, but is actually a global wealth transfer. The pattern is now clear. Revolutionary France, Civil War America, or modern Asia, it does not matter. The themes repeat. Paper currency collapses. Debt chains nations and families. And survivors are never the most trusting. They are the ones who notice the system's fragility before the break. History shows, terrifyingly, that collapse is neither ancient nor distant. It happens now. Between 2019 to 2021, Lebanese banks did what most people in developed countries cannot imagine. They locked their doors. Citizens awoke to frozen deposits, withdrawal limits, and a collapsing currency. The Lebanese pound lost over 90% of its value. Lifelong savings became mere pennies. People lined up at banks begging to access their money only to be told it's gone. Not just small savers, but middle-class families, retirees, doctors, and engineers, all who trusted the system, were wiped out. The lesson is brutal and clear. Your money in the bank is not a treasure chest. It is a loan to an institution, which may choose not to return it in a crisis. The best survivors either diversified abroad, held real assets like gold or property, or kept cash outside the bank. Everyone else fell into the trap. If this seems remote, it is not. In 2008, Americans watched their homes taken and retirements vanish while the banks causing the crisis were bailed out. During the 2020 pandemic, trillions were printed to keep the machine running, fattening asset prices while ordinary wages remained fixed. In 2023, regional U.S. banks almost collapsed overnight. Depositors lost confidence, reminding us that the too-big-to-fail myth is a fairy tale. It is secure only until the door slams. So, how do you protect yourself when everything collapses? History shows there is no single answer. With gold in Byzantium, with liquidity to buy abandoned land after the Black Death, by not trusting too-big-to-fail banks in Florence, with tangible goods in the Confederacy, with food and property in France, by avoiding borrowing in someone else's currency in Asia, or by withdrawing before Lebanese banks closed. Patterns change, but the theme remains. Survival comes not from blind faith in paper or institutions, but from recognizing real value when illusions collapse. Here is the paradox to wake you up. Collapse is both tragedy and opportunity. Destruction for the unprepared, but a chance to acquire assets far below cost for those resilient, with liquidity or unprintable assets. After the Black Death, peasants became landowners. After 2008, cash holders bought homes while millions faced foreclosure. History teaches that protection is not only defense, but also seizing what others must give under pressure. Wealth is not just what you own, it is also what you can do. Survivors across history were not just those with gold or land. They were those who could create value when others could not. The baker who could provide bread, the craftsman who could repair tools, the farmer who could feed a community, the merchant who could move goods across borders. They not only survived, but thrived during crises. In every crisis, money loses meaning, but production never disappears. People still need food, construction, trade, trade, and basic life necessities. Those who can meet these needs do not stay poor long. The deeper protection, not blind trust in institutions, expecting governments or banks to save you, but real assets, real skills, and recognizing that illusions always collapse. Every crisis is a transfer, from the overtrusting to the prepared minority, from paper promises to tangible value, from passive savers to active producers. History has shown these patterns repeatedly. The question is no longer what will collapse. Everything will. The question is whether you will be among the minority who own something real when the masses are left holding empty promises. History does not repeat, but if ignored, it crushes you. If this has given you a new perspective, subscribe. History holds the answers, and I will show you where to look.